Hello, everyone. Welcome to AWS She Builds Tech Skills. My name is May, and I'm a solutions architect from AWS. Today, I have got a super host, Mai. How are you doing, Mai?
Good, thanks, May. How are you?
I am good. And welcome, everyone. Welcome, tech community, and welcome to our episode 22 of She Builds Tech Skills. If you have been following She Builds Tech Skills, we are monthly live streaming on all the topics about the technology, demo, a little bit about the career journey to showcase women in the tech community. And if you haven't seen our announcement in a couple of months ago, we also announced our launch on the podcast. So we now have a podcast across all the major platforms. So if you're on the go, if you're commuting, you can still listen to our podcast. We upload our podcast every week because we also have a counterparts, She Builds Tech Skill across the world. So while you're commuting, download the podcast, listen to any of the new updates happening in AWS across the tech, and hear from our special guests. And Mike, how is everything going on your end?
Yeah, it's as good as it can be. What about what about you, May?
I'm good because I just got back from holiday a couple of days ago. So I'm still catching up on my emails, still have the energy from the holidays. Happy to be back here. And today we are going to use the chat function. So if you're new to Twitch, we use chat function a lot. That's how you engage with us and also other audience. So I based out of Sydney, Australia. And where do you base?
I'm in Australia. Yeah, let's just leave it
So
as that.
where's everyone joining from? Pop it in the chat. Mai is also looking after chat today. So, where's everyone joining from? Would love to hear. Are you joining from Australia? Are you joining across the world? Would love to hear from you. We've got people joining from Washington, D.C., the Morons. Welcome. Welcome. If it is your first She Builds, welcome to the show. Cool.
Dallas,
We
Texas. There seems
Dallas,
to be,
Texas.
yeah, quite a few of the audience members. If I look at the podcast, I can see the demographic of people listening to us. And Texas is like the number one state, as well as
Oh wow.
yeah, as well as Washington D.C. So we have quite a following over there, which is interesting. Maybe there
Welcome.
are tech hubs over there.
Monkey, from the bottom of the ocean. I'm glad you still have the internet to stream and watch the live stream from the bottom of the ocean. Welcome to She Builds. What is the topic for today? Great questions. Today, we're going to talk about the AWS developer tools, and we have got special guests going to talk about what are the pathway for cloud developers and what you can do use. For example, infrastructure as code, and I'm sure a lot of you familiar with what infrastructure as code. But before we dive into, I'm gonna switch to what was your like? You've been in the tech industry for quite a while. What was your first IAC workload, and what was the motivation behind, and what was it like back then?
IAC, we didn't call it IAC back then. We used to call it shell scripting.
Wow.
There's a bit of automation happening with like patching servers and stuff like that. Being a sysadmin, our life was pretty much focused on maintaining servers. So
Mhm.
um, yeah, so that was my life. What about you, mate?
Actually, my was we were thrown into a deep end. We started off with Kubernetes and Terraform, so without actually knowing what it was, but because we were just like, okay, that was one of the projects, and then we just started off using it without actually knowing how to use it properly. So that was interesting journey. It does have a little bit of a learning curve for me because like being engineer, we just mostly spend time writing code, pushing it into production, and then there are DevOps team who look after it. But now we just kind of combine back in the day what we were doing in terms of our roles and responsibilities and actual the software engineer starting to do the infrastructure as code. So that was fun learning.
Yeah, awesome. I think this is my partner. There's some running water outside your
Oh, that's
door.
very
Thank
kind.
you. Shout out to my partner for taking care of me.
Oh, I'm sure lemon honey water will help you with the sore throat. All right. So for today's topic, for infrastructure as code, or if you want to call it developer toolkit, we have got a special guest called our special guest is Jyothi Madanlal, who is a solutions architect from AWS and who's based out of Auckland in New Zealand. And she'll be talking about all the developer tools and something really awesome pathway that you can take away from today's sessions. Hello, Jyothi. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, May and Mai, for having me. And
How are
hello,
you
everyone.
doing?
I'm good. Thank you. It's really great to be here.
Oh, we've got someone from Auckland, New Zealand, Caroline. Welcome to the show. So before we talk about today's topic, I just want to touch a little bit about your career. You have such an amazing career in the last 20 years. Am I right?
Yeah, 20 years.
Yeah. That is really awesome. And I just want to touch a little bit about your current role. Like, how did you get into your current role at AWS? And tell us a little bit about your career history.
Yep. Thanks, May. So, as I said, I've got 20 years experience. I started out as a developer back in India, in my hometown. I was having fun. It was just, go to work, have fun with your colleagues, more than, coding. But, and then moved to a different city so that I could advance my skills. And then 10 years ago, we moved to New Zealand. And my journey with the cloud started about 8 years ago when I was at this company called eRoad, where I got the chance to move into the solution architecture team, who gave guidance to the other teams that were there, and also with building out a high throughput event streaming pipeline. So got familiar with Kinesis and all those other tools. And then I was part of a team, so I got the skills, but I started craving for more. So then I moved to a company where I was the only solution architect, and I felt confident when I was able to address the questions that I was faced with, giving that architectural guidance. And then I felt, yeah, probably I'm ready to do this at a larger scale and be able to spread the learnings that I have accumulated across those 20 years in the industry. And so I applied for the role at AWS through a known contact who had worked with me earlier, went through the interview process, and that's how I landed at the role at AWS.
Yeah, no, that's really, really amazing. And I guess so you started off with software developers and then move into solutions architects, and there's still quite a bit of a difference between these two roles. So how, I'm just curious, how did you fill the skills gap, or how did you manage to jump into a different roles which responsibility are slightly different in that case?
Yep, that's a good question. So as part of, with the move to, say, Scrum teams, right? At the start, it used to be waterfall model where you used to have an enterprise architect and they would decide the architecture for the solution that was going to be built, and that would be passed down to you. And all you had to do was to ensure that you wrote good code and had the tests written, the unit tests at that time. But with the move to more agile methodologies, and being able to develop and deploy things faster, teams were made to be a bit more independent and make more decisions on your architecture and infrastructure that you would like to choose, and as well with microservices. So I got a bit of exposure by being a part of a team as well as leading. So I became a team lead first, so software developer, team lead / tech lead. and then moved into the solution architecture team, where it was also about spreading those best practices and looking ahead, right? It was not just about that one feature that you had to build. So it was a progressive journey that I had, but
Yep.
at each stage I was, getting the skills required to now be able to ask the right questions, to be able to give the best practice, best architectural guidances.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I would love to hear anyone who is watching the stream, or if you're listening on the podcast, let us know if you have switched the role within your career from from different role to another role that will make you more challenging, that's you exposed to new things that you haven't experienced before. Let us know in the chat. Share us your experience. This is the place to learn each other, share their journey, and hopefully we can learn from each other. And Jyothi, if I may ask, I guess within your career, what advice would you give to people who is thinking about pivoting to a tech career roles? Maybe somebody who comes from non-tech backgrounds. What advice would you give? It could be a younger generations who's thinking about, should I go into tech, or should I look into something different?
Yeah, that's a question that many people do ask me, and my response is that you should. I mean, if you think that it's because you have to be good at math, and only then can you consider a career in tech, you're probably you're probably misunderstanding that. You don't have to be good at math to take on a role in tech. You just need to be a problem solver. That's what we need in this industry. We need, problem solvers, analytical thinking, and it doesn't have to mean, a tech role doesn't have to mean that you are coding. A tech role can be like what we do as solution architects, where we listen to what our customers are wanting from us, work backwards from their problems to give them an architecture diagram and best practice guidance. You could also be in other software development companies. You can also be a product owner or a scrum master, where if you're a people person, you can look at eliminating bottlenecks that prevent people from getting things done, the software developers. So you don't have to be in tech to only code, but you can still have a tech role, or a company in a tech, or a role in a tech company, and you don't have to be good at math for that. So yeah,
that's a great call out, isn't it?
Oh,
usually
speaking of call outs, Cygamer says, my previous career as a full-time seafarer to a certified AWS cloud practitioner.
wow.
That's pretty awesome. How do you not get seasick is my question. Yeah, well, now speaking of some of the highlights you mentioned, so Jyothi, can you share one of the highlights from your career journey?
Yep, I can probably share two, actually, rather than just one. Sorry, because I couldn't think of just one. So one is working in that, becoming a solution architect, or being a part of the solution architects team at eRoad, where I was working on the high throughput event ingestion pipelines. And we were tasked with being able to find a new database. And, so until then I had experience only with relational databases, and then we discovered DynamoDB and looked at Rick Houlihan's talk, where he talks about single table design, and we managed to adopt all of those practices and deliver a pipeline that worked for the company using DynamoDB. And that was a highlight for me, to be able to learn those skills on the job and be able to deliver. That was one of those things. The other one was when I was at say Way Beyond as a solution architect, and we had there was a customer who was threatening to pull out because they were not being able to get all of their data through the WebSocket. And then so I spent a week working with them to come up with an alternative solution that worked for them using S3 pre-signed URLs and API endpoints. So that was another highlight, that I was able to kind of deliver for the customer, and the customer then went on to order more devices that they sold. So yeah, I guess those were two highlights that I have from my career, at least from the recent.
Oh, that's amazing. So you solved so many problems for your customers with awesome solutions using AWS, which is awesome. And speaking of solutions, so it seems like you've got something that you want to show us in terms of your infrastructure as code and a bit of a demo. So
Yes.
should we switch to that?
Yep, I will share my screen. So, being a software developer for almost 20 years and hands-on, this is really, I'm really excited to be doing this. So, thank you for the opportunity. Just going to share my screen, and you should be seeing my screen. So, today we'll talk about the golden pathways for cloud developers. Basically, what we will do is we look at what are the current development challenges that most software development teams face, and then what are the tools that are available from AWS as offerings that you can leverage to address some of those challenges. And then we look at look at when to choose serverless and when to look at containers, and look at two tools which you've probably maybe already heard of, but which enhance further the development experience on the cloud. So looking at the current development challenges, most businesses, so most software development businesses and teams, the business requires of the development team fast delivery of software that scales, is highly available, fault tolerant, and has zero downtime. And the expectation is that in doing so, the team is therefore focusing on innovation and building out features that differentiate the company from the competition. So that's what the business wants. The company wants to be, number one. And while the developers would love to do that, they're also faced with the complexities of dealing with multiple programming languages, working with different frameworks and libraries within each of those different languages, setting them up, becoming gurus in each of those. And also learning how to integrate with different vendors and APIs. What are the best API integration patterns that should be applied? Being able to socialize these best practices across the team, enforcing them. And all of this, takes the time from the developers from being able to meet the needs of the business. So it shows up as stress. And so what we have today is, on the slide, is all of the services that AWS has to offer cloud developers. It's broken down by the stage of the development pipeline that they're applicable to. And I'll go over some of them, and we'll see how each of them help at that particular stage. They are all designed in a way to be able to follow the best practices when it comes to development, where you want to be able to identify problems as early as possible. So following the shift left strategy, where it's much cheaper to find a bug at the earliest stage, as in, when it's either an author source artifact, build and test, rather than after it's been deployed and given to the customer. So it's much cheaper to find a bug sooner rather than later. And so that's how most of these tools are designed as well, to enable you and support you in that journey. So starting, with the author phase, we have Cloud9, which is the web-based IDE, and it supports multiple different IDEs. You do no longer need a powerful laptop with large amounts of RAM and CPU to be able to run your IntelliJ or your Eclipse. And very often, I've personally had Eclipse and IntelliJ crashing my laptop. So you can leverage Cloud9 for that. And then the IDE toolkits, which bring in a bit of, which enhance your IDE experience. For example, by automatically generating your infrastructure as a diagram. So it kind of enhances you to be able to have it more visual and help you build code faster and gain confidence in the infrastructure that you've built out. And then the SDKs, which enable you to interact with the AWS resources. Code Whisperer is one of the tools that we'll talk about later. It is a code recommender engine that we have on AWS, which again is meant to help you build code faster by by enabling you to use the recommendations which follow best practices to build code faster or to write code faster.
I just wanted to jump in there. May, have you used Code Whisperer and demo that in front of customers?
I haven't done a demo, but I tested out the Code Whisperer, which is pretty cool. Like it's safe. It's like you can see the benefits. Usually when you write a code, like for example, a silly example, for loop, and then you have those indexes, and then all these different languages have a slightly different syntax. And then if you're just testing it out, like when I was testing out the Code Whisperer, it was pretty accurate. And also it gave you the options of like, okay, this could be another way to write a different kind of statement rather than what I usually write. So I think that's just like sometimes you will go and Google that, okay, like how do you index or how do you find a particular things in the array and stuff. And in that case, that could definitely help. Yeah.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. What I love about it is, it takes away that time that it takes you to go to Stack Overflow perhaps and look for a
Yeah.
solution, and then pass through it, find the one that actually is follows best practices, and then
Yeah.
get that into your IDE.
Yeah.
And the other one that I really love, because personally, as I said, I've been a tech lead before, so I've had to review a lot of code and a lot of unit tests, and
Yeah.
unit tests that actually do nothing, and then that's a waste of time. So I really love that with Code Whisperer you can write your unit tests as well. You can just say write a unit test for this method,
Oh,
and
really? That's
it formulates it
amazing.
for you. Yes, it's
I
really
haven't
amazing.
tried that.
Yeah,
Because it can be quite it takes quite a bit of time to like write all the unit test case to cover like each individual use cases. So
yes.
if the code whisperer can do it, it would definitely save time. I remember writing just like for a simple statement, and then you write all the boundary, during within that index. So yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I found that really cool, because then it not only saves time with writing those tests, but it also
Mm,
saves time for the person who has to review it. But
yeah.
we'll talk more about Code Whisperer in a bit, as well. So moving on with the source and artifact for your version control, for your source as well as your artifacts, there's code commit and code artifact. And then for your images, your container images, there's ECR. Code Guru is another interesting service, which is which scans your okay, sorry, which scans your code and makes recommendations on improving performance as well as perhaps better security. From a build perspective, we have Code Build, which is our continuous integration platform, and Device Farm, which enables you to be able to simulate different devices and be able to test across multiple devices. So it helps you build faster, because you don't need actual physical hardware to be able to test across multiple devices. And Fault Injection Simulator, which has the concept of experiment templates, which enable you to inject failures into your workload to see how your workload would react and validate. Like, for example, let's say you had a highly available, the requirement was for you to have a highly available application. You can validate that it is in fact highly available by injecting different kinds of faults using Fault Injection Simulator.
That's um that's interesting. So with I haven't actually tried the fault injection. Is it something like for example, if you have a database connection to your application, and then that will just, if you have high available multi-AZ database connection, and then that would kill one connection from the one AZ. Is that something
Yes.
for the fault in? Yeah, cool. Okay.
Yeah, it's very flexible. It enables you. It has some predefined templates that you can use, which are common use cases that most applications
Yeah.
cover. But it also gives you the ability to write your own fault, simulation if you wanted to simulate.
So
a
you can
particular
customize the configuration on how you feel,
Kind of
how
like
you want
Netflix, right? Like Netflix with their Chaos Monkey,
to.
and
Yeah.
it's pretty cool because my customer's looking at it for chaos testing EKS. They have a lot of Kubernetes clusters, and they had a look at that. It's like, okay, we'll start doing this. So it's pretty cool.
Yes, yeah, because it has the predefined templates for EKS, ECS. So, killing a task, killing a whole cluster, it has different templates already pre-built, which, there's really no excuse. And you can put it into your pipeline to validate, before you deploy, that your application meets the SLAs. So you can even put it into your delivery pipeline.
That's pretty cool. That's
Yes.
test the resiliency of the application, how the application responds and how the team responds to it, I guess.
Yes. So it ensures that then you have the necessary alarms and
Yeah.
monitoring in place as well. Yes. So you're following best practices of the well-architected framework, the pillars. From the deployment perspective, for deploying your application with limited downtime, you have Code Deploy. And on the top there, we have Code Pipeline, which actually covers the source artifact, build and test and deploy phases. So it's our continuous delivery service offering from AWS, which enables you to build out your release pipelines using these services. Plus, it allows it easily integrates with other services as well. Like, for example, if you were not using Code Commit, and you were using, say, GitHub, it directly integrates with GitHub as well. Moving to the monitor, manage, and secure. So we just touched based on it about observability and monitoring. So CloudWatch for your metrics as well as your logs to ensure that you know how your application is performing, how the infrastructure is performing, and you can set up alarms. From a security standpoint, you have Shield, WAF, and Security Hub, which enhance the security posture of your workload as well as your application, and as well as make your application resilient to DDoS attacks. Right on the top there is Code Catalyst, which is the other service which we are going to talk about, and I will see a demo of it. But what's really nice about Code Catalyst is it covers across all these 5 development stages. So right from the author phase all the way to the monitor and manage phase, you can leverage Code Catalyst to simplify and be able to enable developers to start developing faster on the cloud. And right on the top, we have the golden pathway. So for any application, when you develop an application, you have infrastructure, which is infrastructure as code, as per best practices. You have CDK for that, the Cloud Development Kit. And then an application almost has a front end. So the front end, in order to build your front end quickly, you can use Amplify, and AWS Amplify enables you to build both mobile front ends as well as web applications. And it also hosts the web application for you without you having to deal with, say, CloudFront or handling certificates, because as per best practices, you should be using HTTPS. It handles the certificates for you as well. And then for the backend, you could
sorry
use...
to butt in. Shall we see how this all works? Yes. I think a lot of our audience wants to see how this all fits in. So
I want to see how the demo works on the Code Whisperer.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I don't have a demo of Code Whisperer today, but I do have it of Code Catalyst. But let's just move on.
Oh, even better.
So we do have, so just covering off the slide, for backends, you could either use Lambdas or, you could use containers. So talking about serverless a little bit more. So serverless app is typically, it has an event source, which could be a REST or a HTTP endpoint being invoked. Maybe from a front end, you have a shopping website, and a user adds an item to to their cart or lists the item in their cart. Each of that can invoke a HTTP endpoint. And then the Lambda, which is where your actual application runs, the business logic to handle that invocation runs. And Lambda can then invoke either an external service, another API, or interact with the other services within the AWS offering. So like maybe calling a database. And so golden pathway is for serverless. So in order to build a serverless application quickly on AWS, you could use a serverless application model, which is SAM, and it is a CLI-based offering, which is in a YAML form. It's basically in a file, which is very similar if you've used CloudFormation. It's a simplified version of your CloudFormation template in YAML format, which enables you to define your serverless application. And you can invoke it locally. So it enables you to build that application quickly. And if your application starts to get a bit more complicated, you can use CDK, which is the Cloud Development Kit. And what we'll do is I'll skip talking about it and go to the demo, so you can look at the demo and see how CDK works. So here's a demo of me using CDK. This is an application of a serverless application where it's a Lambda fronted by an API gateway. So this is where I'm defining my stack. I'm importing the needed libraries, and I'm defining my Lambda function, the API gateway. And what this stack does is it gets a request HTTP request, which is which contains some English statement in English, and then it passes it on to the Amazon Translate service, which converts it into a different language. So this is the business logic that you're seeing here. Where I'm creating an instance of the Translate client, passing in the parameters saying convert English to Korean, creating a new text command, and getting the response back from the translate client to convert the past string into, say, Korean here, and return the response. So I'm going to use CDK here to deploy the infrastructure for the stack. So when you do CDK deploy, what it does is it shows you what are the resources that it is going to be deploying. And once you say yes, it shows you the status of your CloudFormation deployment right in the same terminal. And the CDK stack, I did have an output in it, which gave me the endpoint that should be invoked. So basically, I'm just calling that with hi there in English, and it's given me a response back in Korean. Another interesting one is CDK watch. So CDK watch is a command which enables you to be able to make changes to your stack, and it takes care of deploying them as you make changes in your IDE. So you don't have to do anything. You just do CDK watch, make your changes, and it auto deploys the changes for you. So here I changed from Korean to Japanese, and I've deployed it, and it has given me the response back in Japanese when I ran it. So that's a very cool feature of CDK, where you can use the CDK watch to quickly deploy, and it helps you build faster when you use CDK. So one thing that I want to add about CDK is also you can use this tool called CDKNAG, which helps you validate to the CDKNAG, which helps you validate your CDK stack, whether it's following best practices, and lets you know if you've got open security groups and stuff. So you can put that into your pipeline, in code pipeline, and integrate that to get that validation.
Awesome. So we've got a comment here from the audience. I've used CDK before, but I prefer Terraform. I think a lot of customers, it's either Terraform or CDK. It's
I guess it's just, a lot of people have a different preference. Like even in my previous job, some part of the team used CDK, some used Terraform. It's just it's just the preference within the team and the experience that they have, but being able to do the concept of infrastructure as code really helps them. So
and I think I've personally seen that, and I've personally used CloudFormation actually. So directly from CloudFormation, I moved to CDK. So I can see with CDK the advantages, because it's in the same programming language that you normally write your software, otherwise your application software. So it does have that slight advantage that it's in a very familiar interface. So from a container perspective, there are three container orchestration platforms from AWS. So there's the Fargate, which is completely serverless. And if you want a simple offering, you could use ECS. And if you wanted an offering where you had to use an open platform, you could consider using EKS. With Fargate, you don't have to manage EC2 instances or handle AMIs, just as any other serverless offering at AWS. So AppRunner, so with Fargate, so if you've already used Fargate, you would have noticed that you have to, once you configure your Fargate task and your service, you still need to register the tasks with the load balancer. You still need to build out your CI/CD pipeline. And AppRunner simplifies that for you. So AppRunner takes care of, all you need to do is you point AppRunner to the container image, specify your scaling, max and min scaling rules, and it takes care of registering the tasks with a load balancer, as well as setting up the CI/CD pipeline. And it is so suitable for, an application which is fronted by a HTTP endpoint, and it can talk to the resources in the VPC using the VPC connector. One limitation with AppRunner, or one thing that you should be aware of, is that it can only scale between 1 to 25 tasks. So if you have a requirement where you need more than 25 tasks, probably AppRunner is not what you're looking for. What we have here is a demo where I've pointed already, AppRunner towards a container image, and it has deployed the AppRunner, the Fargate tasks and stuff at the back for me. And it has actually, registered it with a load balancer with this domain name, which is not very user-friendly. And I want to, make it more user-friendly because I want to give it to a customer. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to be registering a custom domain. And you'll see that when it registers, so it's as simple as being able to say link domain, give the domain name that I want to use, which is more user-friendly, like webapi.apprunner.demo.com. And what this will do is it will spit out the instructions that I need to follow in order to register that domain. So it's basically just two Route 53 entries that I will need to create, an alias record and a CNAME record. And that's it. It should continue. My application will be up and running, and within seconds, once it is verified and active, I should be able to use that new domain and interact with the application. So this is a Swagger-based application, which if I go in there, you'll see that I'm able to interact with it. I'm able to make invoke an endpoint and get the response. So it's very simple. It makes it really simple to be able to deploy an application.
So Jyothi, you would say that AppRunner is more for request response kind of applications, right? And if you need an orchestrator, have a look at Fargate, or perhaps if you already have a couple of Kubernetes clusters, you could potentially go down to the EKS route. But yeah,
that's exactly that's absolutely right. So looking at two tools. So we were talking about Code Whisperer earlier. So as we said, it's supported in multiple languages. It's very easy to add into your existing IDE. It's available as a toolkit. And it enables you to write code faster, as we've already covered. So it helps you write your unit tests. There's an auto recommender, which recommends code even without you having to say, this is what I want. It looks at the existing context of the code and the language that you are programming in, and potentially recommends the next line. And you can accept or reject the recommendation. And you can even completely turn off the auto recommender. And then it can also recommend code based on a full comment, where it can recommend line by line a full code block, up to 10 to 15 lines of code or more, and following best practices. It is trained on tens of billions of lines of code. And there is the code reference log, which you can use to look at, to reference, when you want to have a look at where did this code come from? Was it written by the developer? Was it leveraged from Code Whisperer? And where did it come from Code Whisperer? And you can reference it in the reference log.
That's pretty cool. That will make it the pull request review a lot easier.
Yes.
So you can see, is it the generated code, or is it the developer has written their code?
Yes.
Yeah. So reviewing the pull request, if it's only 20 lines of code, that's fine. But if you have 200 lines of code review, that is a bit of a pain.
Yeah. I really found the auto recommender pretty cool as well, because it kind of tries to understand the intent that you have, and automatically, for example, let's say if you're writing a Python application and you're having to import some libraries, it recommends, based on what you've already imported, it recommends the other libraries potentially that you need to import as well.
Yeah, so cool.
It's continuously learning from how, all the habits that you put in as well, right? I was trying to demo this with my customer, and I uncommented. I put comments so I can generate some code through there, and then automatically the recommendation from Code Whisperer had it commented out in the first line. It's so it was it was taking all my sort of habits as I was preparing for the demo. So
that's pretty cool.
I don't know if that was cool or if it was a feature. But for individual builders, I think it is free. So you can start using it for free, which is pretty handy.
Yeah, that's right. I missed that. That is in fact correct, and I think it's about $15 if I'm not wrong for business use. So moving on to Code Catalyst. So Code Catalyst is the other tool which was launched at reInvent in 2022. And it is a shared collaborative space for the entire development team, not just for the developers or the testers, but including the product team. So it's one place where you can author a plan for your planning cycle. So plan your build cycle, author your code, get it reviewed, build it, test it, deploy it, and manage and monitor, as well as operate your entire software. So for me personally, I have spent cases where, like with going back to the challenges that we spoke about earlier, was one big challenge was we wanted our stacks to look a similar way. Like you wanted to ensure that there were this level of metrics being sent out to CloudWatch. There was this is the way you should write out your code, and being kind of quite biased. And that's what most large development teams or development companies require, where they want that conformance. And it often took about a week to get that all set up. If I had a new project going, setting up a new Git repository, setting up the pipeline, setting up all of it based on the best practices took about a week. But with Code Catalyst, you'll see, and we'll go quickly into the demo here, is that it's in minutes. You can do all of that in minutes without having to wait a week where, I had to, that in my personal experience, it would take a week. So what I've got here in the demo is that with Code Catalyst, there's the concept of templates, blueprint templates. And these are already pre-existing templates that everyone can use. They're publicly available. And basically what this does is it is like the informed, biased template that enables you to build, say, in this particular case, a to-do web application, which is a Lambda function fronted by a API gateway talking to Dynamo. And it sets up the Git repository, the deployment pipeline, the project planning space. So your sprint board, it sets up all of that for you in a matter of minutes. So all I'm doing here is I've selected the template that I want, configuring the repository name that I want to give it, saying which language I want to deploy the front end in, which region I want to deploy it in. Same for the back end. And give, again, configure the language that I want it in and the region, and create project. Now behind the scenes, this is creating the repository for me. It's creating the development pipeline. You'll quickly see that it's like any Git repository that you're already familiar with. So that's the code. You can navigate it just as you would with any other Git repository provider. So here's the workflow. The workflow is where it defines the pipeline. So you can see that's very visual. So like in my experience, very often the product owner would be like, has this been deployed? And because they don't have an access to, say, AWS, they would not be able to know if something was deployed or not. And what's great about this is because the product owners are also going to be working in the same space, they have the single pane, like you can see, because the Scrum board is also here, which has been created. You can create your tickets, which is what your product owner would normally be doing, creating the tickets and assigning the priority, prioritizing the backlog. They can do all of that from this one single interface. And even the developers can therefore be able to easily, they don't have to navigate between different tools. It's all in one place. And the other thing that this solves, which is great, is that personally, I've had to, I have this history where every year I almost break my laptop, and I've got to set up my development environment again on every laptop. This simplifies that because it ensures that every developer has the same development environment. It sets up the framework, the library accordingly, so that I don't need to have to set that up on my laptop. And so therefore it helps you build much faster and brings the whole team together in one place. So it's quite good.
I think I can see the like from my experience, when you join a new organization, they have their own GitHub repo and everything set up in their own particular way. And it takes about half a day for me. When you get a new laptop, you join the company and you set everything's up, good to go, still doesn't work. So I can see the benefits of putting everything together, not just like single engineering team, but you also got like product team and working together on a single workspace. I think that's really beneficial.
Yeah, you were same. You're better than me. You say half a day. I take a few days before I get my laptop working. Yeah, so this is really this is really.
I think that is the pain. Usually when you get a new laptop and you set up everything, it was environment, Git environment, anything that you have on your computer, have to set it up again.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is pretty awesome because it takes away a lot of pain for especially small companies, right, where they still don't know what are the best practices. So it helps there. And with bigger companies and larger companies where you have your own best practices that you want to socialize, you can develop your own blueprints and share that within your space. It's not public. You can still develop your own blueprints. So that's also quite, good.
That's
there.
quite useful. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's standardized across the board, and if they want to implement or you customize it, they build it on top of it, but you have the blueprint across all the engineering teams.
Yeah. Yeah. So in summary, yeah, we saw what are the challenges that most development teams face and the tools that AWS has to offer. And we looked at the serverless application and what, AppRunner, which helps you build containerized applications quicker. And then we looked at Code Whisperer and Code Catalyst, where, each of these tools enable you to address quite a few of those development challenges that, we've identified. And that's it. That's what what I have so far.
Awesome. So I have a few questions here around the content that you just showed everyone. So, I'm just wondering, could you give us advice on, when to decide between using serverless or container services?
Yeah. So typically, like if you have, one rule of thumb is that if you have high performance computing needs, perhaps it's not serverless, maybe it's containers, or you have to look at the other offerings that we have. But for most applications, which are not high performance computing applications, how do you choose? So generally, serverless applications tend to be event driven, and the logic that handles each of those events is broken down into small units of execution, which take a short amount of time to run, and it generally is something where it's the incoming traffic of those events is spiky. So for example, if you have a ticketing website where say during say maybe during COVID, where there was no one really going to an event because there was nothing happening, and then there was suddenly a spurt in events, as we see. It's quite spiky, or for example, there was a new event that suddenly was launched or released. You'd see that initial burst and spike in the traffic to be able to book those tickets. So that's one example where you would potentially use serverless. Containerized applications generally tend to be where the traffic is consistent, and it's better where you can therefore optimize your application to and it has to be running almost all the time, and then it also is more suitable for applications that run for a longer duration of time. So it's which take longer to run and more compute intensive or processing intensive. For batch oriented, you could potentially use containers.
Yeah. So any long running jobs over 15 minutes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Awesome. So you showed us a bit of CDK. So what do you reckon the best practices are for using CDK?
Yeah. So having personally used CDK as well as CloudFormation, one thing that is good to do with CDK and in general with AWS services resources actually is to avoid hard coding your resource names. So you want to ensure that you are parameterizing them, but not hard coding, because when you hard code, it generally tends to lead to conflict with resource names. So allow it to be generated, but for potentially use suffixes to be able to identify them for you. Make use of suffixes. Typically, you have applications where you have a data stack, and typical applications have a database with static data, and then you have your compute. So it's generally recommended that you separate your compute and your data stacks into two separate stacks to avoid inadvertent changes. Personally, I have seen someone, because we did not follow these practices with CloudFormation as well, I have seen someone have an entire database in production rewritten. It was recreated because they made a change to one parameter and they didn't realize that it would make that change. So it prevents you from making inadvertent changes to your actual data stack. And then the other one is avoid using SDK along with CDK, because it's in the same programming language that you're writing. It's, people tend to mix the two. Avoid doing that. While that works, it makes your CDK stack more runtime dependent, and therefore, there may be a higher chance of failure. You want your CDK stack to be validated much earlier in the stack. So you try to hard code and leverage the cdk.context.json file for some resources which you have to look up. So for example, like very often you have to look up your VPC, the subnets in which you need to deploy your say your compute. So you tend to put those into the CDK context.json file so that you can be able to make your stack more definitive rather than runtime dependent, which can cause something that's probably unexpected, and then you have to make some changes. And you could also use ensure you model all of your different environments using CDK. So like, your dev, your test, your staging, and your prod. With CDK context, you can have one per environment as well. So you can have a different, like, you'd have a different VPC ID for each environment. So you can have multiple CDK context.json files, one per environment. So you leverage that and model that. So yeah, those are some of the best practices with CDK.
That makes sense. May, do you have any comments or anything to add to that?
No, I think I think those are really good, like useful tips if you're using CDK, and just to when you're making decision whether containers or serverless, just to think about how the workload is and what's your requirements, deciding which technology or which services is the best suited for your use case. Yeah. Awesome. I think we are nearly coming to the end of our show. I just want to say thank you, Jyothi, for sharing your sessions, sharing your career journey, talking about the cloud development tools, and hopefully, audience, there are a lot of interaction in the chat. So thank you to the audience as well for engaging with us. If you have any questions regarding the topic today, please feel free to reach out to Jyothi on her LinkedIn profile. I'm going to drop a link in the chat as well. So connect with Jyothi on the LinkedIn as well. If you want to hear more about Shebuild's tech skills, join our LinkedIn group on Shebuild's program as well. So we post regularly on all the upcoming events. For example, we do that. We do this live streaming monthly. So please join the LinkedIn group. Stay connected with us on LinkedIn. We post all the new announcement and anything that is happening in the Shebuild community or tech community. We will post it on the LinkedIn. So with that, thank you, everyone. Thanks to the audience. Thank you, Mai, and I know you're a little sick, so hopefully after this live streaming, you can get some time off. But thank you, everyone, and we will see you next time.
Thank you, everyone. Bye. Thanks, May and Mai.